welcome. This is Jean Eaton of Information Managers. It is my honor and pleasure to be with you today at Practice Management Nuggets, webinars for your healthcare practice. This is a regular interview series with practice managers, healthcare providers, or trusted vendors who support healthcare practices. Our topics help primary care practice managers, healthcare providers, and owners to implement, maintain, or improve their business and practice administration so that healthcare providers can focus on providing quality healthcare services. I am your host, Jean Eaton, your practice management mentor. Many of you know that my career started as a receptionist and transcriptionist in a busy family medical walk-in practice before I moved into health records and health information management and hospital administration. Now I specialize my consulting practice to independent healthcare practices who want to start, grow, or fix their practice administration so that healthcare providers can focus on providing quality healthcare services. This week, our guest is Sergy. Sergy has recently authored a new book called The Handy Communication Answer Book at Amazon. And we have Lauren on the line today as our guest, and we're going to talk about communication and helping healthcare providers or practice managers master efficient and effective communication for every setting and occasion. Welcome, Lauren.
Thank you so much, Jean. It's always delightful to get to speak with you and to get to reach out to your audience as well.
Well, we've done this before, and I'm really excited about your book and having you come back again. So you're a well-known expert in the subject of communications and public speaking, and you're here with us today to talk about practical, helpful, and downright interesting facts and figures about communication so that every healthcare provider or practice manager in our audience can understand and master effective and efficient communication for every setting and occasion. That's a mouthful to say.
It is a mouthful, but you said it very nicely, very clearly, good enunciation. The communication coach is happy.
I'm very glad that it made you happy. Thank you, Lauren. So we've talked before on the show, and you've given us communication tips about dealing with patients in a hurry, in an efficient way. So I'm really excited about your new book and what you're going to help us with today. So one of the questions I wanted to ask you, Lauren, is to tell me a little bit more about how you recognized that you had a skill or a passion to help people with their communication and public speaking strategies.
Well, it kind of came about because when I was doing my studies and working on my graduate degree, I became the person that everyone else asked to give all the presentations. So people started saying, well, Lauren, you're just so darn good at presenting. Could you maybe do our group project, our group presentation? And to be honest, for a long time, I thought that they were just trying to foist work off on me. But then when I began talking on the lecture circuit within the library profession, which is where I got my start, what started happening at these conferences is that after my presentation, I'd get fantastic feedback from the people who did the training, and I was usually training people on topics like databases, how to use databases. And conference organizers started coming up to me, and they would say, Lauren, that was a great topic. Never thought that databases could be interesting. Could you come back to our conference again, but next time teach us how to present? We want our people to learn how to present like you. And I realized that this is something I could do quite readily because I have a background in radio and in acting, and I had blended together what I learned there with what I learned in terms of creating good content and teachable content in my university work and my work as a staff trainer, and had basically systematized the process. So it was something that I had a knack for, but the communication piece was also something that I had training in and then consciously worked at to improve and to create a system for addressing it. And that's how I started teaching other people to do the same.
That's really interesting.
Mm-hmm.
So people came to you because they recognized that you had a comfort level and a skill level, and then you kind of realized that you do. You internalized it and identified that there is something that you can offer and that you're good at, and that you're really good about picking those pieces apart so that you can help and support somebody else to learn and improve their personal communication skills.
Yeah, that's just it. And because the way that I developed my skill set and my approach to public speaking and to communication, because it uses so many different disciplines, so many different aspects of people's personalities, as well as different areas that people are already knowledgeable in, it was a way I found that I could reach a lot of people and work with a lot of different personality types, so that we could tease out their own existing strengths in terms of communication and then build on that.
Well, I guess that leads us to the elephant in the room. So, as you know, I talk about the pink elephant in the room, and every practice has a pink elephant. It's that problem in your organization that just never quite gets fixed. You've created workarounds or promise that you'll get to it someday, or it's a problem that everyone knows is there and everyone kind of tries to ignore it. But maybe in this case, the pink elephant is a little bit more internal. We all have a pink elephant in that maybe we're not as good at communicating as we think we are, as maybe we're not as good as we hope we want to be, and we have a fear factor, so we want to be able to do that better. So public speaking and communication is hard. It's not as easy as it seems, and Lauren, I'm hoping you can help us with that today.
Oh, yes, definitely. And with communication, one of that big pink elephants that's always in the room is that often when we seek to communicate something to someone else, what we're actually trying to do is force our opinions on them. Instead of figuring out where the other person is coming from within marketing, knowing what their worldview is, worldview is a marketing concept that is very, very applicable to communication. Instead of trying to figure out the other person's worldview and then massage how we use our own words and how we communicate our own ideas to match that person's worldview, we expect people to change their worldview so that they come to think, oh yes, what Lauren is telling me is right. Instead of meeting them where they are, many of us try to force people over to our side without actually making the effort to, like I said, to change the way that we express our ideas or change the way that we appeal to the other person so that we're kind of meeting them halfway.
Okay, so communication isn't always convincing somebody that you have to do it my way.
No, it's rarely convincing them that you have to do it your way. Very rarely. Usually what it is helping them see how your opinion fits within their landscape, how really what you have to contribute, how what you're trying to communicate makes sense within their world.
Okay. We need to get into this in more detail, but first of all, Lauren, I'm going to ask you, what is your number one tip for the healthcare providers and practice managers about communicating effectively and efficiently?
My number one tip is to understand the context of the person that you're communicating with and do it without judgment. That's a big aspect of it, because if you're imposing your own judgments and your own values on someone else's reality, what you'll find is that you'll slip into that trap of trying to force an opinion on them rather than meeting them halfway, rather than finding a meeting of the minds. You'll try to force that opinion instead. So seek to understand their context, judgment-free.
That's it. Seek to understand their context, judgment-free.
Yeah.
Excellent. Okay. That is a big tip. So let's talk some more about that concept, Lauren. Why is communication and public speaking a critical topic for healthcare providers and practice managers? Why should they pay attention to this area?
Healthcare providers and practice managers, they work in a high-stakes, high-stress environment. And once you have an environment like that, it means that any kind of communication becomes an even bigger boilerplate issue than it already is. It imposes a certain degree of communication difficulty within any situation because tensions are already going to be a little bit higher than they are normally. The topics that people are dealing with tend to be very, very sensitive, and you're working with people who might already be anxious because of everything that's going on in the practice, all of the crazy things that are going on day to day. So for practice managers and healthcare professionals, having a good handle on their communications, that they can communicate calmly, rationally, and with a great deal of forethought and strategy is going to make their lives easier. It's going to make the lives of the people that they deal with a lot easier, and it's going to create fewer communication conflicts and much less confusion. Clarity will just really increase, and it just makes everyone's lives so much easier when that happens in your communication environment.
Okay. So communication is an important part in our daily work, and we communicate with a lot of different people. We communicate with our patients and with our coworkers and colleagues, and making sure that we have good communication is critically important when we're talking about healthcare.
Yep, absolutely. Even more so, I think, in healthcare than it is within a lot of other fields. As people who are communicating in a healthcare environment, they're coming at it with very different understandings of what it is they're discussing. They're coming at it with a lot of pre-existing tension, quite possibly. Like I said, it's that high-stakes, high-stress environment. And we don't always, it's hard sometimes to change the way we view a topic or change even small things, well, not so small things, like the language we use or the jargon that we trot out when we're discussing our area of expertise with someone else. But within healthcare, that clarity aspect is so very, very important. So I really do feel that that people within the healthcare profession have an even greater need for clear, thoughtful, careful communication than people in many other lines of work. No pressure, though. No pressure.
Well, I know that you're here to help us with some tips, and you've got 3 learning points for us today. So I'm going to hand it over to you, Lauren, to walk us through these 3 learning points.
Absolutely. Let's have a look at the first learning point, and this directly relates to that pink elephant that we alluded to at the beginning of this podcast. And that is that you shouldn't seek to make your audience understand you. It's not the communicator's job to force the audience to change their understanding of something or to make them understand me. Again, you don't want to try to force your opinion or your views on someone else. Instead, really look at figuring out how you can adapt your message to what their worldview is instead. There's a marketing guru out there, his name is Seth Godin. Brilliant, well-known, I love his work, and he describes this as filling their landscape. What you need to do in order to fill someone's landscape with your own ideas is look at how they're painting their landscape, look at the colors that they use in their palette, and then see if you can paint your ideas in those colors and in that style so that it makes sense. In terms of verbal communication or written communication, this comes through when you try to figure out what kind of language the other person uses, and then modify your language so that it suits them, so that it suits their understanding. Look at aspects such as what culture does this person belong to, and is that going to change the way their landscape is? Can I adapt the way that I'm describing my opinion so that it is culturally appropriate for where they come from, or does it make sense within that person's context? And you can look at other factors, too, that might be affecting this person's worldview that's going to affect their context or their landscape, such as what is going on in their business or in their work life that could be affecting their current outlook on the thing it is we need to discuss. Is there something going on there that I might need to acknowledge or adapt to get my point across better? Your goal should be to see how close to the other person you can move yourself before trying to move them closer to your viewpoint. Always seek to be driving at their viewpoint and working with their worldview first. That will make you a more sensitive communicator, a more effective communicator, and will also make it easier for you to persuade people in the end. So it actually makes your job, if you're in a persuasive situation, a lot easier.
Okay.
The next learning point that I'd like to bring up is this idea of having a specific goal for each conversation, for each communication. This goal is going to drive the flow and the path of your conversation. Now, we're all, most of us are going to be very familiar with the concept of setting goals. It's something that we're told we should do in life, in business, everywhere. When it comes to communication, though, I find that many people have a very nebulous idea of what their goal for any conversation actually is, or the goal that they're driving at is something that might be achievable, 3 meetings down the road or 5 months down the road, but isn't necessarily achievable in the conversation they're having or the presentation they're giving right now. So you want to figure out what the immediate goal is. If you are trying to, let's say you're trying to negotiate a better deal with a vendor who works with your healthcare practice, and you have a specific figure in mind for what it is you want to pay for their product or service, you need to ask yourself, can I get them to, in this conversation, in this meeting, is it likely that I'm going to be able to reach an agreement on the end price for this product or service? If the answer is no, in this meeting, all that I'm trying to do, all that I might be able to do is get them to agree to review our portfolio or review our client account with their supervisor, then that's the goal that you need to focus your conversation in on. You don't need to focus your conversation about getting that end deal that you really want to make. You just need to focus on ensuring that they're going to be willing to review your account. So you break down the goal into what is the next step. Can I get this person to take the next step? And that's what you focus on. And you might even want to consider what the person that you're speaking it with, what their goals are as well. Do they have the same goals in this conversation as you do? And if they don't, can you rearrange your goal so that it's closer to the goal that your client or the person that you're communicating with might have? The closer you can bring together your two goals, the easier it's going to be to have a productive conversation. And finally, within goals, think of whether or not there's any shadow goals that are operating in the background. Shadow goals are things that we don't necessarily acknowledge outright or that we don't talk about in the conversation, but that are still informing the way that we're communicating with the other people. A shadow goal could be something like needing to save face. If the communication situation is something where maybe someone is being called to task for something that went wrong, they might have the hidden goal that what they want to do in this conversation is save face so that they look better coming out of it. Or maybe what they're trying to do is impress the person that they're speaking with. Maybe what you're trying to do is impress the person that you're speaking with. You're not going to state that as an official goal for the conversation, but it's still informing the conversation. It's still working in the background. So if you can figure both those immediate overt goals, what you want to achieve by the end of the conversation or presentation, and those shadow goals, the things that are going to color the way that this conversation goes, you'll be off on a really good footing to actually achieving what it is you're setting out to doing. And finally, the learning point number 3, and this is a big one. We're going to bust right into full-on rhetoric here. I'm a rhetoric nut, and I think that everyone's lives can be made a bit better by a bit more rhetoric. Rhetoric specifically refers to the art and science of persuasion and arguing. Arguing doesn't mean fighting, by the way. Arguing just means creating a position that you need to back up or that you need to prove to someone. So rhetoric is all about persuasion. You want to figure out what angle of argument you're going to use to appeal to your audience's sensibilities. There are 3 angles within rhetoric that work towards this. They're called the appeals. And we call them the appeals because they appeal to different sensibilities that your audience might have. The first appeal is called logos. This is the appeal to logic. Now, it's pretty easy to say, okay, logic, I understand what that is. It means that I need to form a rational argument and provide proof for how what I am saying is correct. But within rhetoric, what you need to take into consideration is, again, that worldview, that context of the audience that might affect what they see as being logical or rational. So with some people, they won't see scientific evidence as being as fitting within what they perceive as logic because maybe they don't trust science. We see this a lot with alternative health practices or with things like fad diets, where, oh, I don't trust those scientific studies because maybe they're being funded by big pharma. So if you were trying to convince someone like that of an argument that they're making, it would be a bad idea to use a big pharmacological study as evidence to create a logical argument. Instead, what you might go for are things like social proof. What are other people saying? Do they value the opinions of this online forum very highly? And what are people on that website saying about this topic? That is the sort of logic that audience will value. So that's the logic that you want to use when you're appealing to logos, when you're appealing to their logic. The next appeal to look at is called ethos. And this is appeal to someone's character, to someone's notion of what makes a person have a good reputation or be trustworthy. These can be things like making your point by saying, I know what I'm talking about because I have all of this great education or all of this great experience that's informing me. You might create an ethos argument by saying, you can believe me because I am friends with all of these very important people in these fields. So you can trust me because you can trust them. That's another ethos argument. And if you want a really good example for how ethos works, look at how politicians create credibility. How politicians establish their credibility, especially in their campaigns. What they're doing is they're creating these ethos, these character and credibility arguments they're going to trot out to their audience. And this is something that, once again, depending on who it is you're speaking to, you might want to really work at. Why can the audience trust you? Figure that out. That will be your ethos appeal, your ethos argument. And finally, the last rhetorical appeal that you want to consider when you're having a communication with someone is pathos. This is the appeal to somebody's emotion. A lot of people think that pathos is logos' weaker younger cousin, but that's not the case at all. When you appeal to somebody's emotional sensibilities, what you're doing is increasing their commitment to what it is that you've said, or increasing the likelihood that they're going to take action on something that you've recommended. Patriotism and loyalty hinge on pathos. They hinge on our own intrinsic feelings that we should be following someone, or we just, we deep down know that Canada is the best country out there, and so we are going to follow that Canadian flag. That's a pathos argument. If you're wondering how to really twig into someone's emotions, look at things like, what are their hopes, their dreams, and their fears? What makes them anxious? What makes them angry? Anger can be a very, very strong appeal that you work with when you're creating an argument. What gives them hope? What makes them excited? And can you use words that are going to trigger those emotions in them? This is something that you want to use at the end of a conversation when you're saying, okay, person A, I really want you to make this phone call. It's for your own good. It's for the good of your team. Make this phone call and set up this appointment. You're going to ensure that you're creating a better working environment, that you're going to be moving forward and away from the problem that you're currently having, moving towards a really solution. All of these things are going to get them feeling excited and hopeful about what making the phone call is going to do. So you bring in that emotional appeal right at the end of your conversation or at the end of your presentation. Between these three things, and they're all pretty big, all three of these learning points are pretty big, but between these three, you're going to create more clarity in your communications. You're going to be able to meet the person where they are at. Instead of trying to force them to understand you, you're going to understand them first and then appeal to their worldview. And you're going to ensure that you're always working towards a clear end goal using the most appropriate path. And that is kind of a holy grail goal of communication, but it's something that everyone can work towards if they apply these three concepts: worldview, goals, and rhetorical appeals. What angle you're going to tackle this argument or this conversation from.
Okay. So there were a lot of things in there, Lauren, that you said that really made sense to me. So I'm wondering if we can rework it or put it all in an example. Would you go through all of these, try to hit all of these points in a communication?
Yes, absolutely. And I'll use an example from my own business. If I was working with a healthcare practice manager to convince them that they wanted to take me on as to provide training, let's say, to provide communication training for their staff, the first thing that I'm going to do is figure out their worldview. So I'm going to have a few conversations with them where I look into their practice and I try to find out what sort of problems they're having. Why do they want this training right now? Why might they be actually interested in bringing in an outsider to help their team communicate better? What communication problems are they having? How might this be affecting their business? How might this be affecting their clients? What's it doing to the morale or the stress levels within their practice, and what's it doing to their own morale and stress levels? That is going to paint me their landscape. That is how I figure out their worldview. I'll also ask questions like, what does this healthcare practice manager value in terms of their vendors? Do they value people with a lot of education? Do they value people with a lot of practical experience who have been working in the field for many years? I'll gather together all of these bits of information so I can figure out what their landscape looks like. From then, I'm going to think of, where do I want to go with this person? Obviously, my end goal is to get them to sign me on as a trainer for their staff, but what is the goal for the phone call, let's say, that I'm going to be having with them right away? Do I want them to sign me on as a vendor immediately? Well, if it's our first phone call, that's probably not going to happen. So maybe what I want to do with this phone call is get them to agree to have a face-to-face meeting with me where we're actually going to establish a lesson plan for them or a training plan for their staff. That might be my immediate goal. And from there, I have that established as the goal for the phone conversation that I'll be having from this person. And I'm also going to ask, what is their goal from the conversation? Their goal will probably be to figure out what sort of services I have and figure out what I charge for these services. So are these goals that I can satisfy on their end? Do I want to tell them what I charge for my services? Maybe not, because maybe I need to get that face-to-face meeting with them in order to build a pricing structure for them. So even though I might not be able to fully meet the other person's goals, because I know what they want and what I want, I can then kind of plan out a conversation that will hopefully fulfill both of those goals for myself and for the person that I'm speaking to, for the healthcare practice manager. And then finally, I'm going to knit all of this together in terms of, what appeals do I need to work with them? What sort of evidence are they going to want to hear from me as to why my training works to improve a healthcare practice situation? And I would pull in things like testimonials from other people that I've worked with. I would ensure that I can speak about return on investment. This is how much time you're going to be saving because your staff will be communicating more clearly. This is the sort of better experience you can expect from the people who are coming to your healthcare practice because the communication will be clearer. That will help me figure out my logical argument that I'm going to put forward to them. I'll then want to ensure that they understand why I am an expert in this area. So that will be building my ethos, my character argument. You can believe that I know what I'm doing because I've done it with this many clients, with these kinds of clients for this many years. I'll understand what sort of things they value in a vendor, and then I'm going to ensure that I reinforce that I have those characteristics. And I'm also going to really hone in on the frustrations that this individual is having and what sort of things would relieve those frustrations. What is going to make this healthcare practice manager feel better? What feelings do they want? And I'll ensure that I bring up those feelings during my conversation so that I can give them that sense of relief that they're looking for, or that sense of progress that they're looking for, and maybe give them some hope that I can meet their needs and fix this problem for them. I would do all those things just for a single phone conversation. And even though it might sound really, really involved and like a very, very lengthy process, this is often something that you can carry out in 10 minutes of deep thought. 10 minutes before the phone conversation is going to happen, brainstorm what's going on and try to figure out if you can find as many worldview items that you can work with as you can. Identify that goal and then look at those 3 different angles, the logic, the character, and the emotion that you're going to work with during the conversation. The more often you do this process, the faster you become at doing it. And then very rapidly, you'll start going into conversations already planning this in minutes beforehand, before you go into the conversation. The important thing is that you give this a try, that you engage with it repeatedly, and that you do this as a way of strategically planning out all of your conversations, all of your presentations, whatever situation you're communicating in. Use this as a strategic approach to pre-plan that communication.
So I have a better understanding now that these 3 steps, so a user or, each of us individually can use a strategic approach to pre-plan our communication with other people that we work with people that we want to engage and to have value, or there's an importance to have a communication that's effective, and to take time to practice to efficiently use the 3 learning points that will help us to have effective communications.
Absolutely, and something that I strongly suggest to anyone who's who's developing communication skills and trying to learn and apply something new is pick the learning point that you think is going to have the greatest impact. Pick that one first and only work on that one first. So if you think that, let's say that your big concern is that you can never seem to understand where people are coming from. That's a common thing that a lot of people express frustration over. I just don't get where this person is coming from. Then I would say first only focus on learning how to see something from someone else's perspective. Focus on figuring out how you can determine someone's worldview, how you can figure out their landscape, and only work on that. Don't worry about goals. Don't worry about establishing goals. Don't worry about figuring out those rhetorical appeals. Only focus on sleuthing out and trying to learn how to determine somebody's worldview. Once you get comfortable with that, once you learn to see things from other people's perspective more easily, then you can say, okay, now I'm going to look at drafting really clear goals for each conversation because I know that that's something I don't do. So only then focus on the goal aspect. If you're comfortable with worldview and goals and you just need to become more persuasive, okay, focus only on those rhetorical appeals, on figuring out how you need to argue something logically by logos, by ethos, or by pathos, how to use that notion of appealing to logic, appealing to character, and appealing to emotion to make yourself more persuasive. But you don't need to do, like I said, you don't need to do all of these 3 learning points at once. Pick the one that you think is going to get you the most gain, that's going to give you the biggest win. Just work on that and then start incorporating the others.
That is really helpful, Lauren, making sure that we can focus on one key thing. Maybe it's something that we have is our part of our weakest link in providing good communications, and focus on that piece until we get a comfort level. That sounds like a strategy that everyone can make use of. Lauren, you've given us some really great tips, and I'm going to have to take some time to unpack this and think things through and develop that strategic approach to pre-planning communications. What is the benefit of doing this? If we take the time and energy to be able to do that, what do you see are the benefits of effective and efficient communication?
The benefits is that, first up, you're going to reduce a lot of stress that you experience in your day-to-day communication, not just in your workplace, but in your life. Overall, communication is a really stressful thing for a lot of people. So working on improving it, on thinking of it as a strategic process that you can take control of and that you can do in a smarter way, is really just opening up a whole area where you can make your life a lot easier. The second thing is that it's going to make your communications overall more effective and more productive. You'll be able to have greater clarity, and because the clarity on all parties will be higher, you'll be able to reach your goals with each communication much more easily. Make sure you know what that goal is, for sure. Remember learning point number 2, but you will be able to then achieve what you want more easily to everybody's greater satisfaction.
All right, so we've got some great benefits out of making sure that we do better communication. It takes some time and energy and some practice to be able to do this well. And I'm going to make a guess here that you've got some good tips that are in your handy communication book that will allow us to practice those skills.
I absolutely do. The book is it's a full-on reference book, but what it's meant to be is a very handy guide that you can grab, that you can think, okay, I'm having this communication problem. I don't know how to make people understand me. How can I figure out how to learn, how to see things from other people's perspectives? You can flip open this book and find full-on questions about what is worldview? How can I figure out someone's worldview? What is logic? What is logos? What is rhetoric? You can flip open this book and find answers to those questions. That's how this book was written. It was actually written based off of everyday communication problems that people regularly come to me with, written out in a full-on Q&A format. And everything that we touched on today, there are big chunks of the book dedicated to those items. So if you really love that little bit about the rhetorical appeals and you want to know more, flip open the rhetoric chapter in this book, and it will take you through it in great, gory detail. But it will also break down how to apply these concepts in your day-to-day communication.
Okay, so we're talking about the Handy Communication Answer Book, and it has practical, helpful, and downright interesting facts and figures about communication and how it can accelerate our communication and public speaking efforts and abilities. So we can order this now on Amazon.
Yeah, it's available on Amazon. It's available through Chapters Indigo if you're listening in the States. It's on Barnes & Noble. It's basically through any major book retailer. It is currently in the stores in the U.S. It has been released, and actually it has officially been released in Canada too. I'm just looking at the date now. So you may also be able to find it in a brick-and-mortar bookstore as well.
Congratulations, Lauren. This is a huge accomplishment and very exciting.
It is exciting. I'm excited. I hope that other people are excited too, and that they get great use out of this book. It is your desktop communication coach.
That's a really interesting approach to be able to talk about communication. We do it maybe we don't communicate all day, but we talk all day. And being able to be better at communication is a very important step for those of us who work in healthcare, and even in our personal and family lives. We want to be able to influence efficiently and effectively, and to make sure that we have a good sharing of information and be persuasive when we need to.
Absolutely. I consider it one of those holy grail soft skills that everyone wants and everyone wants to be better at. And it's a process. We're always improving in terms of communication.
Okay. So, Lauren, you've given us the reference book, and we'll have a slide here with how other ways that people can connect with you. What's the best way that people can connect with you to keep up regular reminders about improving their communication skills?
The best way is to head over to my website, laurensergy.com. That's LaurenSergy.com, and sign up for my newsletter. I blog about communication, about a wide range of topics in communication on a very regular basis, usually once a week. And the easiest way to stay on top of that is to have it delivered straight to your inbox through a newsletter subscription.
Okay. Thank you, Lauren. You've given us a lot of information in a short period of time. We've talked about your 3 learning points. Don't try to make your audience understand you. Figure out how you can adapt your message to their worldview instead. Learning point number 2 is to have a specific goal for each conversation or communication and to make it strategic. And the third learning point about figuring out the argument that will best appeal to your audience. These are great tips to help us become efficient and effective with our communication in any circumstance. And thank you very much for sharing that with us, Lauren.
Thank you so much for giving me the opportunity to do so, Jean.
So I'd like to invite all of you to check out and order the Handy Communication Answer Book at Amazon, and to sign up with Lauren for her newsletter and her blog so that you can keep in touch with her and to be able to continuously improve your communication skills.
Thank you so much, Jean.
Thank you, Lauren, for joining us and sharing your practice management nuggets with us. You have helped us prepare healthcare providers and practice managers to get better results with strategic communication. I love surrounding myself with practice managers and healthcare providers who want to start, grow, and improve their practices. And I want to help you with more great tips, tools, templates, and training that you can use right away. Members of Practice Management Nuggets will receive a link after our webinar today with the Learning Resources Guide. You can also scroll down and download that Learning Resources Guide off of our website today. I search for guest experts who will share their #1 tip with you. Let me know if there is a topic or guest expert that you want to hear on Practice Management Nuggets for your healthcare practice. This is Jean Eaton, your practice management mentor. Thanking you for joining us today, and I look forward to seeing you again. Stay tuned.